So in my last video, I talked about the Stephen King books that I had already read, and in this video, I want to talk about the Stephen King books that I want to read and just kind of give a brief little blip about why I think they're interesting. And yeah, this video is just going to show you what's on that list. The first Stephen King book I plan on reading once I finish Misery, which, as I said in my last video, I'm about 70 pages into and enjoying it so far, is Dolores Claiborne. And the reason for that is because I think the premise of the story is interesting, and as far as I can tell, it's more of, I guess, a mystery as opposed to like horror. And I think I've just been kind of in that mood lately, just to kind of get away from like pure horror, um, and just more like interpersonal relations and all that. So I read a little bit about this book, and I also know that there's a movie about this one as well, but I wanted to read the book for that reason. Different Seasons is also on my list. This collection of novellas, there are four of them: the Shawshank Redemption, the Body, the Apt Pupil, or just Apt Pupil, and the Breathing Method. Um, Again, I feel as if I'm in more of a drama mood as opposed to like a horror mood, and I think it's a refreshing break to kind of read some novellas of his. I've actually never read a novella collection of Stephen King's. I know that he is coming out with one, I believe, in May of this year, that is also on my list, and we'll talk about that later. So yeah, I thought I'd give it a shot, especially before I get the one that's coming out in May. And yeah, see how that goes. When it comes to Billy Summers, for some reason, when I first saw the cover art, I think of this book, I thought it was related to the Mr. Mercedes book universe, if you will. And that I'm not really sure why. It just kind of gave me that vibe, and so I was not interested in reading it, as I discussed in my last video about my thoughts on Mr. Mercedes. Um, but it actually isn't. So it went back on my list because I read a little bit of the summary. I try not to read too much just because I have found that with Stephen King books, sometimes if you read the summary on the back of the book or online, it kind of gives away a lot of plot. That happened with me with 11/22/63 a little bit, and some other books of his, and I was like, whoa, dude, chill. So I try not to read too much, but this one did grab my attention as, this retired assassin, for lack of better words. I understand that's not actually what he was, but um kind of taking on one more job, and yeah, kind of scoping out his prey, if you will. So I thought that was interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading it. And then we have Gerald's Game, and I have seen the movie on Netflix about this, and I actually didn't know that it was a Stephen King story. I watched it years ago, um, before I really started reading his books or got into like his space a little bit. But yeah, this was a book. I didn't know that. And I saw the movie. I enjoyed it. And after reading The Shining, and now that I'm reading Misery, I am very fascinated to see how Stephen King writes more isolation, because so far I can tell he does it very well. And yeah, so that's why this book is on my list for sure. I'd love to see the writing style. So that leads to You Like It Darker, which I mentioned earlier. It is a collection of novellas, I believe, by Stephen King, and it is coming out this May. And I found it funny that on the back of this book, there's a quote by Stephen King saying, "You like it darker? Well, damn, so do I," or something like that. And I thought that was really exciting, especially with how, and this is no shade to Stephen King, with how old he's getting, and just to see that he still has that passion and he still wants to make that connection with his audience. I really appreciate it, and this makes me excited. This cover art is very ominous to me. There's like a serene, like, it's like it invites serenity, but it also, oh my gosh, it's like a crocodile. I just noticed that. Oh my gosh, that's crazy as I'm recording this. That's like I thought it was just like a mountain. Wow. Okay. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in this, and we'll see how this goes. And then I have these last two stories. Well, this is a novella, a collection of novellas, If It Bleeds, for last because they're not necessarily on my to be read list. However, I do want to just make a comment about them. I actually did start reading If It Bleeds. Can't remember when, but it was before The Shining, maybe before Revival when I read them. And I got into, I think, halfway through Mr. Harrigan's Phone and just kind of set it aside, especially because I know that the character Holly appears in this book, which I didn't know about. And again, I'm over the Mr. Mercedes universe, and I do not think Holly is a very strong character, in my opinion. I don't understand why she got her own book recently, but that's just me kind of ranting. But yeah, I could do a whole video dedicated on Mr. Mercedes and how I feel about that whole thing. And also, Gunslinger, the first book in the Dark Tower series, is on this list as well. The Dark Tower series is a pretty long series, so that's why it's kind of at the end, because I'm not really prioritizing it over the other stories, but once I get through those, I'm sure that I'll probably visit this series. I've heard pretty good things about it. And I believe that more books are still coming out, and Stephen King has said that he will continue writing them as long as fans want them, and I think that's really nice. But yeah, I don't know too much about this series, but I kind of prefer that going into books. But I definitely like to read it someday. So those are the books on my list right now that I want to read by Stephen King, and that list kind of changes here and there, but I am glad that I'm making progress on that list after a while. I think in my next video I will make a list about books by Stephen King that I am not particularly drawn to, that I might not read, and then I might move away from Stephen King for a little bit and focus on other authors. But yeah, we'll see. All right. See ya.